Weight management. Let's discuss the strategies related to managing your body weight. Treatment for overweight and obesity ranges from simplistic to quite complicated. But in the end, what we're talking about is trying to balance the amount of energy that's going into the body versus the amount of energy that's going out of the body. So, in order for you to lose weight, you have to have less energy going in than going out. We have a few options for this. Obviously, we can eat less. Typically, eating less can be a one-way ticket to nowhere, depending on how much excess calories you're eating. For a number of people that have weight issues, they've been cutting back their intake over the years, and when you do a nutrient analysis on them, they're not necessarily eating excessive amounts of calories, but they've messed up their energy expenditure in a way that it's really hard um, they struggle to eat less. But for some people, maybe they're eating bags of M&Ms or Hershey's Kisses, and it becomes an easier choice, large portion sizes, to reduce it. We could also eat the same and exercise more, and then therefore we expend more energies. Or we can do both. We can eat less and exercise more. All right, so how much of this do we need to do? So we do have some estimates as to how many kilocalories there are in a body of fat, a pound of body fat. Um, Generally, the estimate is around 3,500 calories per pound of body fat. So the idea would be, in order to lose a pound of weight or body fat, you have to have a deficit of 3,500 calories. Um, as far as our fat storage is concerned, you have a combination of body fat plus a little lean tissue. So they're saying that it is a little bit closer to 2,700 calories per pound. But we use the 3,500, and if you were quizzed on it, then I would be looking for that 3,500 calorie range. Let me go back. All right, so things to think about as far as the energy deficit is concerned. I mean, all of you have done your body assessments in terms of your diet analysis project and gotten an estimated energy requirements. And I am certain that, with the exception of a few of you, you required far less than 3,500 calories per day. So even if you ate nothing for an entire day, it would be unlikely that you would lose a pound of weight. So for those of you who have found yourself getting on and off the scale day to day, day in and day out, and see large fluctuations in your weight, it's important to recognize that the majority of that fluctuation is based on fluid changes and not on actual body weight. You would have to eat nothing or eat something and burn off the better part of 3,000 calories in order to see a real pound of weight loss. So weight or body fat goes on over time, and body fat comes off over time. It is not something that happens overnight. All right, so what are our treatment options? We can do something more simple, like changing your diet or increasing your regular exercise plan. And what I mean by simple is not that it's easy, but the approaches are something that anyone could do. Then there are prescription medications. There are a few choices here. One being Ally, and there are some others that are being studied, but largely we've been pretty unsuccessful with prescription medications. And then we know a lot of people that are in that severely obese or morbidly obese category that have resorted to surgeries, and we got three types: the gastric sleeve, the bypass, and the banding. I'm not going anywhere. All right, so let's talk about the diet and exercise approach. Okay, a lifestyle change that includes looking at the types and amounts of foods, as well as assessing the type and amount of physical activity. And then we need to take a look at the behaviors that are stimulating or interfering with healthful eating or healthful physical activity. Without this behavior modification strategy, then all the interventions are really doomed to fail. So we really have to look at this as three prongs of a fork, and they need to all be in place in order to successfully lose weight with a diet and exercise approach. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about behavior modification. So behavior modification is evaluating environmental stimuli to eating and changing them. So what might some of those examples be? For some of you, they might be social. Maybe you're hanging out with your friends and they're all eating Doritos, and so you might not have been eating Doritos, but you're with them and so you eat Doritos. Maybe it's that you're studying and when you get bored, you get stimulated to eat. Maybe when you're tired, you start eating You're driven to eat. Maybe you were raised in a family where you couldn't leave the table until your dinner plate was empty. Maybe you were trained that dinner didn't end until you had a dessert item. All of these are behaviors that stimulate eating and therefore must be modified if we're going to have a more healthful eating style. All right, so here are some examples of things that we can do that would be considered behavior modification. So for some people, eating only at set times or in one location. So in other words, you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner only, no snacks in between, or perhaps you only allow yourself to eat when you're sitting at the table, and so not in front of the TV or computer screens or any other distractions. Uh, a lot of people find that if they keep a journal, like you did with the Diet Analysis Project, that it does allow them to be more aware of what they're eating and to control that. And then, of course, avoid buying those problem foods. If you know that you're going to go through a whole bag of Doritos, don't buy them. And then there won't be the opportunity to do that. Some people do better with small, regular meals throughout the day rather than big meals, although others will do better with a regimented 3 meals a day and no snacking in between. Chewing slow and stop eating when you're full. I think recognizing or learning to recognize satiety is the number one thing that you can do. Um, if you're out to eat or in a situation, share your food with other people. Don't feel that obligation to consume everything that's in front of you. Um, Stay away from those vending machines. They have a tendency to really only have junk food in them, and I'm sure the Hoot and Scoot and whatnot, it gets a little bit harder to find healthful options, and perhaps going into the dining commons is a little easier. And most of all, do not shop when you're hungry, because I will guarantee you, you will eat things that or eat or buy things you would not normally buy. And there are many, many more, like using a smaller plate or glass. There are lots of things you can do in the dining commons about not going up for seconds or whatnot. So once we identify and you look at behaviors that are driving your eating, then you can start to put in approaches to interrupt that behavior. So how do we evaluate whether a weight loss program is a good one? And some of the things to take into mind are how quickly are they promising the weight goes off. If it's quick, then it would be considered a fad diet and not sustainable, because it's one thing to lose weight, it's another thing to maintain the weight loss. So in order to maintain the weight loss, you're looking at a lifestyle change, both food, behavior, and exercise wise, not just something you do temporarily. So rate of loss, big promises of large amounts of weight is not a good idea, because typically it's not a sustainable lifestyle plan. It should be flexible, so whether you're out socially or whether you're at home, it fits into your lifestyle. It's going to modify intake, and it's going to promote healthful foods. It's going to have behavior modification strategies. It's going to talk about those. It's going to encourage those. It's going to support those. It's going to have a physical activity component. We see very clearly in the research that the people that do lose weight and maintain it have a regular physical activity component to their lifestyle that they sustain. And it's got to promote overall health. So it can't, be like the chocolate chip cookie diet or something along that line where it's promoting unhealthy foods. Um, Things we want to avoid are anything that would be what we consider a fad diet, something that's got a crazy theme or gimmick. They claim some new discovery or new science. They recommend, they say that you're going to lose more than 2 pounds of body fat a week, which is very difficult to really do, and don't have any exercise. They might require special foods that you only have to buy from a certain place, or they're very expensive. They often are rigid, have limited menu choices, so they're not sustainable. Um, and they over or underestimate specific nutrients. That there's some kind of a gimmick for weight loss. Some of the things that we do want to recognize is that there is some good research coming out these days about whether the type of calories you're consuming makes a difference or not. So whether it's carbohydrates or fats or proteins. And we do know that proteins and fats have higher satiety values. So in other words, people feel fuller longer when their meals have more protein and fat in them. And so that is something that can be manipulated in the diet in order to help people feel satisfied. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of the data coming out, which is that the more carbohydrates, particularly the fast digesting carbohydrates you eat, the more carbohydrates you crave because of the swinging of your blood sugars. And so we really don't want to be promoting a diet that's high in fast digesting carbohydrates, which would be your refined grains, your sugars. Um, so if you're going to be eating a higher carbohydrate diet, it should be plant-based. So in other words, vegetables, whole fruits, and whole grains, with the whole grains being moderated in portion sizes. And under those circumstances, a higher fat diet, so a moderate carbohydrate and a higher fat diet, does seem to offer some benefits, both from a weight loss perspective as well as from a satiety and craving perspective. Okay, so medications and herbal supplements, there are a variety of them out there. Some have dangerous side effects, some have been removed from the market. I'm not a big proponent of these guys. I don't think that there is a pill that's going to help somebody achieve or maintain a healthy body weight. Lastly, we can take a look at these weight loss surgeries. And one of the things that I want to point out here is that we have three different types. We have a gastrectomy, a bypass, and a banding. And I'm sure most people have heard of bypass. You may not have heard of banding. Most of you probably have not learned about the sleeve gastrectomy. And this is not commonly done, as commonly done as some of the others. And just to orient, we've got our stomach here into our small intestine. So let's talk about what's happening in a gastric bypass surgery. So in a gastric bypass surgery, essentially what they're doing is they're making a new stomach by cutting off the majority of the stomach. So they cut it off and they sew it up. So this becomes the new stomach. The smaller component becomes the new stomach. And then they further take the duodenum and they go down the duodenum and they cut it, and then they take this lower part of the duodenum and the jejunum and they attach that directly to the new stomach. So now the food is going to go from the esophagus into essentially the middle part of the small intestine and then out. So we get weight loss for two reasons. One, you get full really fast and you can't eat enough. And two, you've missed out on all this digestive um, stuff that normally goes on in the stomach and the small intestine. So we also get malabsorption of our calorie nutrients. So we have a reduction in calorie intakes as well from both satiety perspective and volume, as well as being able to digest and absorb. These folks lose a substantial amount of weight fairly quickly. As far as keeping it off, it seems to be more tied to the lifestyle changes that they make in terms of healthful diets and physical activity. A lot of our gastric bypass folks gain a significant amount of the weight back because they don't address the psychological reasons why they overeat and do the dietary and lifestyle modifications that need be. This is a permanent surgery, so once this is done, there's no going back. There are lots of side effects associated with it. It can be effective and it can have some positive ramifications to it, but you really have to be morbidly obese in order to qualify for this. And this is a drastic measure. I think you really have to have exhausted all your other options before you come to this point. So let's talk about gastric banding here for a second. Here they don't cut and paste. What they do is they put this little band around and they squeeze it tight. The food can still get through, but what happens is you get a triggering of satiety because the messages are sent that you're full as this portion of the stomach fills. So people have a tendency to eat less. We're not malabsorpting. So from a nutrient perspective, it's really just about food volume. And again, this band can be adjusted. I'm not sure whether it can be removed or not, but it certainly can be loosened. And this has become a less invasive approach to weight loss surgery. So anyway, these are some of the options. Obviously, there are pros and cons to them, and to me, they're a last-ditch effort. It's something that you should do only if all else has failed. And they will not be successful if you don't do the behavior modification, the dietary changes, and the physical activity changes that are needed regardless. So this is not a quick fix. It can give someone a boost, but it's not a long-term fix unless you do those other pieces.